So we've all heard about indigos, crystal children and rainbow children, but what are the blue ray people? Watch the video and I will tell you what I know. So the blue ray people, because they aren't children anymore, they've been something I've been researching quite a bit of because it resonated so strongly with me. It really touched something in me that just fascinated me, and they came in before the indigos really, from the about 45 through to 1970. Quite often there wasn't huge amounts of them like we're getting now with the crystal children, but there were a few here and there. So what really struck me about it, and that sat really well with me, is that they're empaths. They feel things. They often have health issues due to transmuting too much planetary and people energy, and they're not really forceful people, whereas the indigos won't put up with any rubbish. The blue ray are more likely to just withdraw and spend time alone and deal with whatever they're dealing with, rather than go and make a big song and dance about it. If you push them too far, yes, they will, get cross, but quite often they'd rather avoid conflict. But because they're so sensitive, they tend to take on a huge amount of the energy around them, which can really exhaust them and make them feel very drained and sometimes even overwhelmed if there's a lot of different energies floating around them, like crowded places. It's one of my things I struggle with. I'm really not that comfortable with crowds. I like smaller numbers of people much better, which is probably why I don't mind working in here when I do events, because I have one or two people in here at a time. Out there are hordes of people, but in here I don't have huge amounts of them. So they're have a very deep empathy, and they're here really to transmute the denser energies. They're great teachers, healers. They're here to wake people up. They're here to teach people what their depth is, what their meaning is, and to be true to themselves. And that's something else that's always resonated with me. That's my deepest desire, to help people become all they can be, to empower them, to make them feel strong, to make them feel confident. Those are my passions. So, that's another blue ray thing, another blue ray trait. Yeah, I've just been reading up about it, and it's just like whenever I read it, I start getting a rapid heartbeat and getting all excited, because it's like a whole gap. I'd missed that. Maybe all of you have heard about it. I had not. So I started looking into it a bit more, and it just adds up to so much. They were the ones who came in before these strong indigos started coming in, and these wonderful rainbow children and these crystal children, who are actually also highly sensitive. So they do need a little bit of help with managing their emotions. But quite often blue ray kids are raised in confusing or dysfunctional families. They don't make a whole lot of sense to them, and they often even have to heal some very ancient pain in the whole family patterning. So that is part of their journey in life, and they often don't really fully come into their power till a little bit later in life. They know it's there, but for quite a long time they often try to avoid it and not deal with it. So when they start waking up, it can often feel like quite overwhelming. I know when I first started becoming very aware spiritually, I was living in the Marlborough Sounds, so I was largely a hermit a lot of the time and just surrounded by nature in the last year or two of that. So I did have a couple of good friends, but they were pretty aware people too, so that wasn't a problem. But yeah, being around nature and fantails and things was what I needed to have around me at that time, and I really struggled with even going into town for a little time I found overwhelming. But then, yes, once I decided to go and travel, it was time to step back out in the world and learn how to deal with all of those energies. So another talent that Blu-rays have that none of the articles I've read have pointed out is that they work a little bit differently to your average spiritual person. They actually read thought forms from people and soul strands and interconnectedness between all the different energies and things like that. There's a great deal of sensitivity to that sort of thing. And yeah, a tendency to take on other people's feelings. So yeah, if somebody else around them feels lousy, they often feel lousy. If somebody else is sick, they might start feeling unwell. And yeah, they're sort of natural healers, but at some point in time in their awakening, it's time to learn that you can't heal everyone, that you can't help everyone, and that each being has their own path in their life, and sometimes they need to get uncomfortable before they're ready to wake up. So that's a pretty big part of the path and the lesson that allows Blu-ray beings to start taking a bit better care of themselves and to start being a little bit more choosy about where they put their energy with people. So they're pretty amazing beings. They're not perfect because they do tend to keep things inside, and that's not always healthy. It's certainly something, yeah, I'm familiar with. So yeah, I just felt such a huge resonance to that whole Blu-ray. The whole blue energy is just something that's so comfortable to me. It feels clear, it feels pure, it feels real. I've always loved it, and I've always had a lot of blue around me energy wise. So yeah, the Blu-rays are really something else entirely. Like, yeah, they did come in before the Indigos. The Indigos actually were the next wave that came in far more empowered and more outspoken and ready to challenge and question everything. So yeah, in that sense their lives have probably been easier. Maybe there's been more conflict, but they haven't taken as much on board. So the journey for the Blu-ray is really to kind of learn a little bit from that and stop taking everything on board, and to start speaking their truth and speaking up for who they are. So just lately, energetically out there in the cosmos, there's been a huge push for people to all, whatever ray color, whatever they are, to stand in their truth and to no longer allow themselves to be in places and situations that are really uncomfortable and disharmonious to them, and that go against their values and their morals and what they believe. So it's a very powerful time for standing in your truth anyway. So it's all coming together really rather nicely at the moment. Yes, we've got a lot of drama and conflict out there in the world, because when the spiritual energies get stronger, the ones that want to suppress that get louder too. Of course they do. They don't want everybody to be awake and empowered and clear, because people stop wanting to play the game and do what they're meant to do and get into debt and spend their lifetimes paying it off and all of those sort of things, you know. Yeah, so it's a pretty exciting time. Read up about the Blu-rays. There's a lot of information online. It has helped me to understand why I actually don't like mainstream, why I don't like being in crowded places, why I don't like doing what everybody else does, and why I like to be by myself quite often. You know, I can be a bit of a loner. I always have been. It was actually something I did even as a child. I remember going to my cousin's birthday party and just didn't like it, so I went for a walk for 2 kilometres and everybody freaked out because I disappeared. And I used to do that a lot as a small child. I just went for walks for miles and miles and miles. I just didn't, yeah, that's what I enjoyed, and I didn't want to be in crowded places. So one of those bizarre things I did as a child that seemed to concern people. I also, according to my father, used to shut the door and tell him I was busy playing. Both my parents, when I was only 3 years old, and they thought that was a bit unusual for a 3-year-old. I just wanted to be left alone sometimes because I was really caught up in one of my imaginary little games I had going where I was either a panther or a pirate or something. So yeah, great imagination. So yeah, that's why it resonates so well with me. If that fits you too, you know, that might be just a missing link. So there's a lot of empathy, great connections to nature, to feelings, a sense of feeling a bit overwhelmed and needing quite a bit of time alone to sort of recover and recharge after having a lot of people contact. And also, yeah, just the sensitivity that's there. And all through all of it, even though it's confusing when you withdraw and don't know what's going on when you're younger, deep down inside you always know what the truth is. Even though you don't know how to explain it or tell people, inside you know very, very deeply what's right, what's wrong. Yeah, they often have trouble communicating what they feel, what they know. I mean, I relate to that really well too. Quite often, like spiritual stuff, I feel it really strongly, but then to actually put that feeling, that sensation into words is not always the easiest thing. But as a youngster, I just didn't know what to do with that at all. I remember sitting on the school bus as a teenager next to somebody who was really unhappy and had had a pretty tough life. He was, he'd been a foster child and had an abusive stepfather and things like that. And I remember sitting there going, why am I so sensitive? I don't want to know this. I don't want to feel this. I don't need this. So yeah, at that point I just didn't want to know. Everything was just overwhelming. My favourite place was on the back of my horse up in the hills. Riding around, and yeah, I loved animals. I always have done because of their straightforward nature and their straightforward needs and desires. I guess they're a lot simpler than a lot of people. So yeah, blue rays, when they become fully empowered, they often stop putting themselves in toxic situations, like relationships that don't respect or honour them. They decide that enough's enough and they actually can't stand it anymore and they just got to get out. So they stop doing things that feel inherently wrong to them. That's a really important step of the coming into power for a blue ray. Yeah, and to just honour their truth and honour what they know inside, and Indigo would just say it. Blue ray would probably go away and feel guilty because they might offend or upset the other person. So that's something they need to get over, to stop worrying about that sort of stuff and taking it all on and start really honouring and being who they are. So that's the kind of the time, the energy we live in now, where all the different rays and frequencies of people are starting to wake up. They're starting to feel a heightened vibration. They're starting to feel more aware of spiritual things, see more spiritual things. It's all speeding up. So whatever ray, energy, colour you are, everybody's feeling it. The reason it hasn't turned all into a beautiful place of magic and harmony is really because it really scares some people, and they need to then try and fight for control. They need to try and regain control. They believe that being in positions of power is what makes them who they are, and they don't understand that they are so much more. So yeah, you look at the world's control freaks who do really crazy random things. It's fear that motivates them more than anything, because who are they without all that power? They would have to come to a realization and an understanding that who they are without all of that is enough. That everybody is always, just as they are, absolutely enough. So yeah, that's why we don't live in blissful harmony. But I do believe more and more people are waking up, so we are going to have many, many more aware and beautiful people to share our ideas and share our thoughts with and be around. So if this has resonated to you with you, please leave a comment below. I'd really like to know what you felt about that. I probably did ramble a bit because I hadn't really formulated clear thoughts about it. I just felt excited about it. So yeah, I turned on the camera and talked. So anyway, lots of love, and see you all in my next video.